My stepmother packed the cooler herself that morning, 2 bottles of champagne, a wheel of brie, a jar of olives she had shipped in from a specialty store in Connecticut, and tucked in with everything else was a change of beneficiary form she had notarized the week before. The yacht left the marina at noon. My stepsister sat on the bow and did not look at me once during the first hour. The water was still, green, and 74 degrees. By 7 that evening, I was in it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women with good lawyers always get the final word. If you have not joined the family yet, hit that subscribe button. This story is worth staying for. Now let me tell you what happened. The first time Colleen packed that cooler, my father was still with us. He had bought it at a marine supply store in 1997, the same year he added a second tugboat to his fleet. It was red canvas with brass buckles, and it weighed about 8 pounds empty. He used to fill it with ham sandwiches and root beer, then bring it on every trip he made from the dock to whichever vessel needed inspecting that week. When Colleen came into our lives, she replaced the ham with prosciutto and the root beer with Prosecco, and my father just smiled. He loved her. And to him, the contents of a cooler were not worth an argument. My father's name was Garrett Whitmore. He built a maritime logistics company from a single tugboat and a borrowed slip at a municipal dock. By the time I was 12, his company handled cargo routing for half the commercial traffic along the eastern seaboard below Norfolk. By the time I was 18, we had moved into the house on Breer Point. White clapboard, a wraparound porch, a full view of the harbor, where his boats came and went all day long. My mother was gone when I was 11. A serious ovarian illness took her in 14 months. My father spent the next 7 years raising me on his own, which meant I grew up on docks, inside tugboat wheelhouses, and in the back row of maritime arbitration hearings, doing algebra homework while attorneys argued about cargo insurance. He married Colleen when I was 18. She was an event planner from Bridgeport who had organized a fundraiser for the harbor master's retirement. She was 40 at the time, polished, well-dressed, easy to talk to, and very good at making every person in a room feel like they had been personally invited. My father liked that about her. He had spent 30 years talking to longshoremen and port captains. Dinner parties were not exactly his specialty. Colleen brought her daughter Jana, who was 16. Jana was quiet, polite, and seemed to live in a constant state of waiting for Colleen's next instruction. They moved in. My father expanded the guest wing for them, and every year after that he took all of us on the annual yacht trip. It had been his tradition since I was 12, when he chartered a 38-footer for my birthday, and let me steer for 20 minutes while he stood behind me, his hands resting on the wheel just in case. My father trusted 2 people with the details of his estate, me and Howard Kessler, his attorney since before I was born. My father passed 3 years ago after a sudden cardiac event at his desk. One hand was on a shipping manifest, the other was beside a cup of coffee that was still warm when his secretary found him. The will reading was on a Thursday. Howard Kessler sat at the head of the conference table in his downtown office. Colleen sat across from him in a black dress she had bought the day before. I could tell it was new because the tag was still tucked inside the collar. Jana sat beside her, looking down at her phone. Howard read the relevant provisions in the exact order my father had arranged them. I received the controlling interest in the company through an irrevocable trust my father had established 10 years earlier, when he was 53 and in perfect health. The trust was managed by an independent trustee, Howard himself, and included provisions for successor beneficiaries, charitable allocation, and what the legal documents called a spendthrift clause. In plain English, that meant nobody could pledge, sell, transfer, or take my interest from me, not even through a court order. Colleen received the right to live in the house on Breer Point for as long as she wished. She also received a monthly stipend of $12,000, drawn from a separate account my father had funded for that exact purpose. She received nothing else. She looked at Howard the way a person looks at someone who has rearranged all their furniture while they were asleep. "That's it?" she asked. Howard closed the folder. "That is the entirety of the distribution." Colleen did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She stood, straightened the hem of her new dress, and walked out of the office. Jana followed her. Neither of them said goodbye to me or to Howard. Over the next 6 months, Colleen began redecorating the house. Small changes at first. New curtains in the dining room, a different rug in the foyer. Then the changes grew bigger. My childhood photos came down from the staircase wall. My mother's watercolors were replaced with abstract prints Colleen ordered from a catalog. The lock on the wine cellar was changed, then the lock on the linen closet. I did not say anything about any of it because my father had wanted her in that house, and I was honoring his wishes. By March, Colleen had hired her own attorney. I found out because he sent a letter to Howard Kessler. Howard called me that afternoon and said 3 words. "She's making moves." He explained it to me over the phone that evening. Colleen's attorney had filed an inquiry with the county probate office about challenging the trust on the grounds of undue influence. The claim was that my father had not been of sound mind when he created the trust, and that I had pressured him into excluding Colleen from a meaningful inheritance. The irony was almost architectural. My father created that trust 10 years before he passed, during a period when he had just completed a full physical, renewed the pilot's license for his Cessna, and personally negotiated a 9-figure cargo contract with a European shipping consortium. The challenge had no real foundation. Any judge who looked at the creation date would understand that before lunch. I asked Howard if we should be worried. "The trust is ironclad," he said. "But I have been doing this for 40 years, Mila. When people run out of legal options, they sometimes get creative." At the time, I did not fully understand what he meant. In the weeks that followed, Colleen became warmer. She started cooking Sunday dinners, roast chicken, potatoes, a crisp salad with the good olive oil. Then she suggested a spa weekend for the 3 of us. She began calling me sweetheart in the hallway, something she had never done before. For 2 straight weeks, she brought me coffee every morning. Same cup, same time, same smile. She would set it on the counter and say, "Good morning, sweetheart," then linger just long enough to watch me take the first sip before leaving the kitchen. I noticed the change. At the time, I thought she was finally accepting reality. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern. Every kind gesture was a test. Every warm smile was a measurement. She was calculating exactly how much trust she needed to build before spending all of it in a single afternoon. In late May, Colleen brought up the annual yacht trip. We had not taken one since my father passed. She mentioned it gently over Sunday dinner. "It has been 3 years since your father left us," she said. "Let us do it properly this time, just the 3 of us, you, me, and Jana." Jana looked up from her plate. Something passed across her face. Not quite worry, not quite recognition. It disappeared before I could name it. I said yes. I said yes because my father had loved that trip more than any tradition he kept, and I was not ready to let it end. I should have let it end. The morning of the trip, I packed a canvas bag with sunscreen, a novel I had been trying to finish since February, and my father's old compass. It was a brass Brunton he had bought in 1989 from a retired merchant captain in Galveston. The man had told him, "It will not tell you where to go. It will tell you which way you are already facing." My father carried it on every voyage after that, and I had carried it in my jacket pocket since the day he was gone. At the marina, the yacht was already waiting. Colleen had arrived early. She stood on the dock in white linen pants and a new watch I had never seen before. Gold, with a thin band. The cooler sat at her feet, packed and buckled. 2 crew members waited on the stern deck. I did not recognize either of them. "Where is Captain Engel?" I asked. "On vacation," Colleen said. "I hired replacements. They came highly recommended." The 2 men nodded at me, but neither introduced himself. One was stocky with a sunburn across his face. The other was thin and wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected the dock behind me. Neither wore a uniform, neither wore a name tag. I stepped aboard. Jana was already on the bow, sitting in one of the cushioned chairs with her phone in her hands, scrolling. She did not look up when I came aboard. She did not say good morning. The only acknowledgement I received was the slight shift of her shoulders, the way a person moves when they know someone is watching but refuse to be the first one to speak. The first hour was ordinary. We motored out of the harbor and into open water along the coast. The sun was high, the wind was soft, and the water was so flat that the reflection of the hull followed behind us like a shadow. Colleen opened the champagne at 2 p.m. and poured 3 glasses. "To family," she said, raising hers. I drank. Jana drank. The champagne was cold and very dry. Out of habit, I checked the compass once. The needle pointed north. We were heading south-southeast along the coast, toward a stretch of coves my father used to anchor in. At 6:30, we stopped in a cove I did not recognize. Colleen poured the last glass of champagne and carried it to where I was standing by the stern rail. "Beautiful evening," she said. Then she leaned in close enough for me to smell brie on her breath and whispered something I will never forget. "Say hello to the sharks for me." Her hand landed in the center of my back before the last word had fully left her mouth. The stern rail gave way, not the way a railing gives under sudden weight, the way a railing moves when the bolts have been loosened, then put back with hardware never meant to hold. I went backward. The water was not cold. That was the first thing I registered. 74 degrees, my father would have said. He always knew the temperature of any body of water within 2 degrees. The second thing I registered was the sound of the engine rising. They were not turning around. I surfaced. Salt stung my eyes. The stern of the yacht was already 30 yards away and moving farther with every second. I could see Jana standing at the rail, looking down at the place where I had been. She did not throw a life ring. She did not call out. She turned, walked into the cabin, and closed the door behind her. The wake rolled over me twice. Then the water went smooth again. I was alone. My shoes were heavy. I kicked them off and watched them sink. My phone was in my back pocket, useless the moment it hit the water. My father's compass was still in my front pocket. It was heavy, brass, glass, and a needle that had been pointing north since 1989. I kept it. I treaded water and looked toward shore. The coastline was visible in the distance, a dark line with a few scattered lights. 2 miles, maybe less. My father had taught me to swim in the harbor when I was 5 years old. He used to say the daughter of a captain who could not swim was a liability. And Garrett Whitmore did not raise liabilities. I started swimming. After 20 minutes, the cramp hit my left calf. I rolled onto my back, let the water hold me, and waited for it to pass. The sky was changing from orange to purple. The first stars were starting to show. I thought about my father. I thought about how he would have checked the rail bolts himself before every trip, because that was the kind of man he was. I thought about Colleen's whisper. I thought about Jana closing the cabin door. Then I saw lights, not shore lights, moving lights, low on the water. A trawler. Then a voice came through a loudspeaker. "You in the water? Stay where you are." Captain Dale Buchanan was 71 years old, a veteran, and the kind of man who looked like the sea had tried to argue with him more than once and lost every time. He pulled me aboard with a boat hook and a grip that felt strong enough to bend steel. "You fall off a party boat?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. Dale did not ask many questions. He handed me a wool blanket that smelled like fish and diesel, poured coffee from a thermos into a steel mug, and pointed me toward a bench bolted to the deck near the wheelhouse. The trawler was not comfortable. It was a working boat. Nets were stacked on the stern. Rust spotted the cleats. A radio crackled with static from inside the cabin. But it was solid. It was above the water, and in that moment, that was enough. "You injured?" he asked. "No." "You want to call someone?" "Yes." He handed me the satellite phone. It was heavy, almost the size of a brick, with a rubber antenna and worn buttons. I called Howard Kessler. He answered on the second ring, which told me he was still at his desk at 9 in the evening, which also told me nothing had changed about Howard in 34 years. "Mila," he said. "I am alive," I said. "Colleen pushed me off the yacht." Silence. 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a very long time for a man who bills in 6-minute increments. "Where are you?" he asked. I looked at Dale. Dale looked at his GPS display and read off the coordinates. Howard repeated them back. "Do not call anyone else," Howard said. "Not the authorities, not Colleen, not Jana." "Why?" "Because right now, Colleen believes you are gone, and if she believes that, she will start making moves. She will file claims. She will contact her lawyer. She will try to access whatever she thinks she can reach, and every move she makes over the next 48 hours will become documented evidence of intent." I understood then. My father had trusted Howard for a reason. "Give me 48 hours, he said. "I will have everything we need." I hung up and looked at Dale. He was leaning against the wheelhouse door with his arms crossed, not even pretending he had not heard every word. "Someone tried to make you disappear," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." "You need to stay invisible for a couple of days?" 2 days. He nodded. I spent 14 months invisible in a jungle outside Da Nang. 2 days on a fishing boat is nothing. Then he went back to the wheelhouse without another word. I sat on the bench with the blanket around my shoulders and my father's compass in my hand. The brass was warm from my pocket. The needle was steady. I held it, watched the lights along the coast, and did not sleep for a very long time. What I'm about to tell you is what Howard told me 48 hours later, after his forensic accountant and retired investigator had finished documenting every move Colleen made while she believed I was lost at sea. The timeline was precise. Howard liked precision. At 7 in the morning, the day after I went overboard, 12 hours after I hit the water, Colleen called the Coast Guard to report me missing. 12 hours. She waited 12 hours before calling anyone. At 7:42 that morning, Colleen called her attorney, Pritchard. At 9:15, Pritchard filed an emergency petition with the county court to preserve estate assets on behalf of Colleen as the sole surviving next of kin. At 11:30, Colleen called the insurance company. It was the first of 3 calls she made that day. There were 3 life insurance policies naming Colleen as the beneficiary, not policies my father had taken out. Policies Colleen had taken out on me over the past 14 months. Total payout, if I was declared lost at sea, $4.2 million. 2 of those policies were less than 6 months old. At 2 in the afternoon, a locksmith arrived at the house. Colleen had him change the lock on my father's study, the same study that held the only physical copies of certain trust documents she knew about. At 4:10, Jana posted on social media, "Please pray for my sister." It was the first time Jana had ever called me her sister in public. Howard had a forensic accountant tracing the insurance policies and a retired investigator documenting the locksmith visit, the attorney filings, and the Coast Guard report timeline. Every action Colleen took was photographed, logged, and time-stamped. By the second morning, Colleen had filed 2 insurance claims, 1 emergency petition, and changed every lock in the house except the front door. I suspect she left that one alone because she did not believe anyone unexpected would be walking through it. Howard called me at sunrise on the second day. I was sitting on Dale's trawler, drinking coffee from the same steel mug, wearing the same borrowed clothes, and watching a pelican land on the bow rail. "She has given us everything we need," Howard said. "Time to come home." I thanked Dale. He looked at me like gratitude was unnecessary. "You do not need to thank me," he said. "Just make sure whoever did this answers for it." "I will," I said. Dale dropped me at a harbor town 40 minutes south of home. Howard sent a car, a black sedan, driven by a man who did not introduce himself and did not ask where I had been. Howard's people were like that, efficient, incurious. During the drive, Howard called twice. The first call was an update on the insurance policies. His forensic accountant had confirmed that Colleen had taken out 3 separate life insurance policies on me over the past 14 months. She had used her position as a household member to access the personal information she needed for the applications. 2 of the policies had been purchased within 6 months of the yacht trip. "That alone is a pattern any prosecutor would recognize," Howard said. The second call was worse. Howard's investigator had found something I did not know. Colleen had been meeting with another attorney for more than a year. Not Pritchard. This attorney specialized in trust litigation. The probate challenge she had filed months earlier, the one Howard had dismissed as having no real foundation, had only been the surface play. Underneath it, Colleen had been preparing a forged codicil to my father's will. The codicil would have added Colleen as a co-beneficiary of the irrevocable trust, giving her the right to 50% of its distributions if I was ever declared legally gone. It was dated 18 months before my father passed. It had been notarized by a third party and witnessed by 2 names Howard did not recognize. It was poorly done. "The notarization date conflicts with your father's travel records," Howard said. "He was in Rotterdam on the date the codicil was supposedly signed. But it existed, and it had been sitting in a drawer inside Colleen's attorney's office, waiting for the right moment. The right moment was supposed to be the moment I was declared lost at sea. I sat in the back of the sedan and watched the highway pass in the early light. The compass rested on the center console, catching the glow from the sunrise. My father had bought it in 1989 from a retired merchant captain in Galveston. The man had told him it would not tell him where to go. It would tell him which way he was already facing. Howard outlined the plan for my return. Not the authorities first. First, I would walk into the house while Colleen was there. With Howard, with the evidence, and in front of witnesses. "Martin will be there," Howard said. Martin was my father's brother. "He arrived this morning to offer condolences." "And who else?" I asked. "That is enough," Howard said. "Martin, me, and you. 3 witnesses. 3 is enough." The house on Breer Point looked the same from the road, white clapboard, dark shutters. The wraparound porch my father had built the summer I turned 14 because my mother had always wanted one, and he had never gotten around to it while she was still here. From the driveway I could already see 2 changes. The porch furniture was new. Colleen had replaced the old wicker set with something modern and gray, and my mother's rocking chair was gone. It had sat in the same place on that porch for 22 years, white paint, chipped along the armrests where she used to grip the wood while watching my father's boats come into the harbor. Now there was a potted plant in its place. Howard's car was already in the driveway. He had arrived an hour earlier. I got out of the sedan wearing borrowed clothes from Captain Dale, a flannel shirt 2 sizes too large. Work jeans held up with a length of dockline because Dale did not own a belt that fit me. My hair was stiff with salt. I had not showered in 2 days. I walked to the front door. I did not knock. It was my house. I used the second key, the one Colleen did not know I had, the one my father had given me when I was 21, when he pressed it into my palm and said, "Keep this somewhere she cannot find it." At the time, I thought he was talking about burglars. Now I understood he was not. The front door opened. The hallway smelled like cedar, my father's closet, the one Colleen had never touched because she said the smell reminded her of him. It may have been the only honest thing she ever said about my father. I walked through the hallway and stopped at the living room doorway. Uncle Martin was sitting on the sofa with a coffee cup in his hand. He saw me first. The cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He did not put it down. He did not stand. He just looked at me with an expression I had never seen on a grown man's face before. The look of someone watching a person return from a place no one expected them to return from. Colleen was mid-sentence talking to Martin about memorial arrangements, flowers. She was saying something about white lilies. Then she turned. Her mouth was still forming the word lilies when she saw me standing in the doorway, wearing a stranger's flannel shirt, salt in my hair, and my father's compass in my hand. Her mouth closed. She did not say my name. Nobody spoke for approximately 7 seconds. I counted them the way my father used to count seconds between lightning and thunder. Not for precision, just for something to hold on to. Martin set his coffee cup down on the side table. The ceramic clicked softly against the wood. Jana appeared at the top of the staircase. She saw me and stopped on the 4th step. Her hand went to the railing and gripped it. I walked to my father's armchair, the one Colleen had never moved because it was too heavy. Then I sat down. Howard entered the room behind me. He was carrying a manila envelope. I looked at Colleen. "I understand you have been busy." Howard opened the envelope. Howard placed the documents on the coffee table one by one, the way my father used to lay out navigation charts, calmly, precisely, with the understanding that every line on the page carried consequences. The first document was 3 life insurance policies, all taken out by Colleen over the past 14 months, all listing herself as the sole beneficiary. Total payout if I was declared gone, $4.2 million. The second document was Colleen's emergency petition, filed 4 hours after she finally reported me missing. It asked the court to preserve estate assets on her behalf as the sole surviving next of kin. The third document was a forged codicil to my father's will. It had been notarized 6 months before the yacht trip and claimed to add Colleen as a co-beneficiary of the irrevocable trust. The notarization date conflicted with my father's travel records. He had been in Rotterdam on the day the codicil was supposedly signed. The fourth document was the Coast Guard incident report. Time of incident, approximately 7 in the evening. Time of report, 7 the following morning. A 12-hour gap. Howard placed his fountain pen on the table beside the documents and clicked it closed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "the trust your husband established is irrevocable, and it contains a spendthrift provision. Even if Mila had been declared legally gone, the assets would have transferred to the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation." He paused. "Not to you. Not to anyone in this room." Colleen did not move. Howard continued. "The insurance claims are fraudulent. The codicil is forged, and the Coast Guard has been made aware of the 12-hour reporting delay." Colleen's face did not show anger. It did not show fear. It showed something worse. The expression of someone realizing she had destroyed her entire life for something she was never going to receive. Martin looked at Colleen. Then he looked at the table. He did not pick up his coffee again. On the staircase, Jana had started crying. She still had not moved from the 4th step. Howard slid the copy of the forged codicil across the table toward Colleen. "You may keep this copy," he said. "We have the original." If you have ever sat across from someone who smiled at you while quietly planning to take everything you had, then you know exactly how that moment felt. The difference between me and a lot of people in that situation is that I had a father who planned ahead, but not everyone does. So if this story is reminding you of someone in your own life, take a breath. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, because this next part is where everything truly begins to unravel. The next 40 minutes produced 14 phone calls. I know because Howard logged every one of them. At 3:14 in the afternoon, Martin called his wife, Carol. He told her what had happened. I could hear Carol's voice through the phone from across the room. She said one word. Then she said it again, louder. At 3:22, Carol called Colleen's sister in Pennsylvania. I do not know what she said, but the call lasted 9 minutes. At 3:31, Colleen's sister called Colleen. Colleen did not answer. She was sitting in the same chair, staring at the documents on the coffee table as if they might rearrange themselves into a different story. At 3:45, Colleen picked up her phone and called Pritchard. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Whatever he said, Colleen hung up and placed the phone face down on the armrest. At 3:52, Jana sent me a text message from the staircase. I felt the borrowed phone vibrate in my pocket. Howard had given me a prepaid phone in the car. Somehow Jana had gotten the number. The message said, "I did not know about the insurance policies. I swear I did not know." At 4:03, Martin called his daughter in Boston. At 4:09, Martin's daughter called Garrett's former business partner. At 4:14, that business partner called Howard. Howard let it go to voicemail because he was standing in my living room, watching a family come apart in real time. Colleen stood at 4:18. Without saying a word, she walked to my father's study. She opened the door with the key she had made after changing the lock, stepped inside, and locked it behind her. The study door closing was the loudest sound in the house that afternoon. Martin turned to me. "Did you call the authorities?" "Not yet," Howard said. He explained that their involvement would come. But first, he wanted Colleen's attorney to arrive so that every conversation from that point forward would be witnessed, recorded, and documented properly. This was not about payback. This was about making sure every piece of evidence was handled in a way the district attorney could actually use. I sat in my father's armchair and listened as the house filled with phone calls and silence. That armchair was the only piece of furniture in the living room that was exactly where my father had left it. Colleen had moved everything else. She had not moved that chair because it weighed 140 pounds, and she could not lift it alone. My father always did build things to last. Jana came downstairs 20 minutes later. She did not enter the living room. She sat on the bottom step of the staircase, placing herself in the hallway where she could see everything, but still remain just outside the room. As if she had not yet decided whether she belonged inside or outside of what was happening. Her eyes were red. She picked at the carpet on the step, pulling at a loose fiber with her thumbnail, the same way she used to do when she was 19, and Colleen was raising her voice about something neither of us were allowed to question. I had seen that gesture 100 times. It was the gesture of someone who had learned how to make herself small. "I knew about the yacht," Jana said. She was looking at the carpet, not at me. "She told me that morning. She said we were going to scare you, that we were going to make you agree to modify the trust." Her voice was quiet. "She said it would be like a negotiation, that you would be frightened, and then you would agree to give her a larger share. Then we would all come back, and everything would be normal." She paused. I did not know about the railing. I let her speak. I did not interrupt. Howard stood near the dining room door, not writing anything down, but listening in the way attorneys listen. Still, focused, as if every word had already become part of the record. "When you went over the side," Jana said, "my mother told me to go below deck. She said it was an accident. She said you would swim to shore. She said people swim to shore all the time." "And you went below deck," I said. Yes. And you poured yourself a glass of champagne. Jana looked up at me for the first time. Her face was not defiant. It was not apologetic either. It was the face of someone who had just heard the truest sentence ever spoken about them and did not have a single word to put against it. I know, she said. I did not forgive her. I was not ready for that. And I was not sure I would ever be. But I looked at her sitting on the bottom step, picking at the carpet. 34 years old, and still sitting exactly where her mother had told her to sit, so I said the only thing I could. You are 34 years old, Jana. At some point, my mother told me to stop being an explanation. She nodded. She did not argue. Then she went back upstairs. That was the beginning of something for Jana. I did not know what, but it was the first time I had ever seen her nod without looking at Colleen first. Pritchard arrived at 4:47. He drove a silver sedan and carried a leather briefcase with monogrammed initials on the clasp. He was the kind of attorney who looked like he had been born wearing a tie. He walked through the front door without knocking, which told me Colleen had given him a key at some point during the past year. That detail bothered me more than it should have. He saw me first, then he saw Howard standing near the dining room door. Then he saw the manila envelope and the documents spread across the coffee table. His face did something complicated. It was not exactly surprise. It was recalculation. The expression of a man who had spent 14 months building a case and had just watched the foundation crack beneath it. Mr. Pritchard, Howard said, I believe you and I should speak privately. They stepped into the dining room. Howard closed the door. I sat in the armchair. Martin sat on the sofa. Neither of us spoke. Through the wall, I could hear Howard's voice. Low, steady, precise. The cadence of someone reading a list that no one in the room could afford to ignore. He was presenting the evidence package, the insurance policies, the forged codicil, the notarization discrepancy, the 12-hour reporting delay. After 12 minutes, the dining room door opened. Pritchard walked out alone. He crossed the living room without looking at me or Martin and went straight to the study door. He knocked. Colleen let him in. The door closed. We heard voices. Colleen's voice was sharp, rising higher with every sentence. Pritchard's voice stayed low. Whatever he was telling her, she did not want to hear it. 10 minutes later, Pritchard came out of the study by himself. He walked to Howard. My client is willing to discuss a resolution, he said. Howard did not blink. There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Pritchard. The insurance claims and the forged codicil are legal matters now. We are not the ones who decide the resolution. The district attorney is. Pritchard looked at me. Then he looked at the front door. He picked up his briefcase. Good evening, he said to no one in particular. And then he walked out. His car started in the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room windows. Then he was gone. Martin turned to me. Did he just leave? Yes, I said, without speaking to Colleen. Martin leaned back on the sofa and rubbed his face with both hands. Your father always said Colleen had expensive taste in everything except attorneys. It was the first thing that had almost made me smile in 3 days. Colleen came out of the study 6 minutes after Pritchard left. She stood in the doorway with her chin lifted and her back straight, the way she always did when she wanted everyone to know she was not afraid, but her hands were shaking. They were the only honest part of her. She looked at me and said something I did not expect. Your father chose you over me every single day for 18 years. Even after he was gone, he still chose you. She did not deny what she had done. She did not apologize. She stood in the frame of my father's study door, surrounded by maritime law books she had never touched, and finally said what she had clearly been thinking for a very long time. I spent 18 years in this house, and I was never allowed to own a single thing in it. Not a painting, not a bank account, not even the right to call myself a Whitmore without someone reminding me it was his name first. Martin shifted on the sofa. He did not speak. I was 40 years old when I married your father, Colleen said. I was an event planner from Bridgeport. I decorated other people's parties. I walked into this house and thought, finally, I am somewhere. Her voice tightened. And then he was gone, and I found out I was a guest. I was always a guest. I listened. I did not interrupt. Not because I owed her the courtesy, but because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to know what a person tells herself to justify leaving someone in the open water. Colleen finished speaking. Then she waited, as if she expected me to argue. I stood. Colleen, I understand that you felt like you had nothing, I said, but you had a stipend. You had a home, and you had a stepdaughter who kept your lights on because her father asked her to. I paused. What you did not have was enough, and for people like you, it is never enough. I watched the sentence land. I watched her understand that this was not the beginning of a negotiation. It was the end of one. Martin looked at the floor. He was holding his coffee cup again, but he still had not taken a sip. The house was very quiet. Through the window behind Colleen, I could see the harbor. The first lights were coming on. I counted them without meaning to, a habit I had inherited from my father. He always counted the lights at dusk because it told him how many boats were still out. 7 lights, all accounted for. I told Howard to proceed. He made 3 phone calls from the dining room with the door open. I could hear every word, so could Colleen. And I knew Howard intended it that way. The first call was to his office. He instructed his paralegal to prepare a formal referral to the district attorney's office for the following morning. 3 counts related to the insurance claims, 1 count related to the forged testamentary document, 1 count related to the incident at sea. The second call was to the trust administration line at the bank that held the separate account funding Colleen's stipend. Howard cited the trust's material breach of good faith clause and directed the bank to suspend all distributions immediately. He explained that attempted harm toward the sole beneficiary qualified as a material breach under any reasonable interpretation of the provision. The third call was to a property management firm. Howard requested a formal 30-day notice to vacate, addressed to Colleen Whitmore at the Breer Point residence. Each call removed another layer. Colleen sat on the edge of the sofa and listened as her world became smaller with every sentence Howard spoke. Money, home, legal standing. 3 calls, 9 minutes. Martin came to me after the calls were finished. He stood by the window, where the harbor lights were still appearing one by one. Your father would have handled this the same way, he said. My father would not have needed to, I said. Martin nodded. Then he put on his coat and left. He had done what he came to do. Bear witness. That was enough. I walked through the house alone. Through the dining room Colleen had redecorated with curtains I did not choose. Through the kitchen where she had made coffee every morning for 2 weeks, wearing a smile that had never really been a smile. Then through the back door and into the garage. My mother's rocking chair was there behind the snowblower, hidden under a green tarp. Dust covered the seat. Cobwebs clung to the armrests, right where the white paint was chipped. I pulled the tarp away. Then I carried the chair through the back door, through the kitchen, through the front hallway, and out to the porch. I placed it in the same spot where it had sat for 22 years. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was just putting something back where it belonged. I sat down. The porch boards creaked beneath the runners. Salt air drifted in from the harbor. The compass was in my pocket. I did not take it out. I did not need to check which way I was facing. Over the next 3 days, my phone rang more than it had in the previous 3 years combined. Garrett's sister, Aunt Marjorie, called first. She lived in New Hampshire and had not visited the house since my father's service. I never trusted that woman, she said. It was the kind of sentence people say afterward, the kind that means very little and costs nothing. But then she said, I am sorry I was not paying closer attention, Mila. That one, I believed. Colleen's brother called on the second day. He was loud, he was angry. He told me I was framing his sister, that she would never harm anyone, and that I should be ashamed of myself. I let him speak for 30 seconds. Then I ended the call. Some conversations are not worth the electricity they consume. The regular yacht captain, Captain Engel, contacted Howard directly. He was the one Colleen had replaced for the trip. He said Colleen had canceled him 3 days before the scheduled departure and told him she had hired a private crew for a smaller outing. He found it unusual because he had captained the Whitmore yacht for 11 years and had never once been replaced. He was willing to testify. Howard told me the 2 crew members Colleen hired had already left the state. No employment records, no captain's license on file. They had been paid in cash. Howard's investigator traced one of them to a marina in South Carolina, where he was working under a different name. The other had not been found. Legitimate crew do not get paid in cash and disappear, Howard said. On the third day, a local newspaper ran a short article. The headline mentioned a maritime inquiry and an incident at sea. I did not read past the headline. Howard handled the press inquiry with a 2-sentence statement and a request for privacy. I went to the office, my father's company. The operations floor went quiet when I walked in. People looked at me. Then they looked at their screens. Then they looked at me again. My operations manager, a man named Decker, walked up to my desk. He had worked for my father since I was in high school. "We heard," he said. "What do you need?" "I need the quarterly report on my desk by Thursday." He looked at me the way Dale had looked at me on the trawler, the expression of someone who had decided not to question another person's method of surviving. "Thursday," he said. "You will have it." The 30 days passed the way weather passes, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Always forward. Colleen packed. She did not ask for help. No one offered. She moved through the house with cardboard boxes and packing tape, room by room, filling each box with the things she had collected over 18 years of being Mrs. Whitmore. I saw the boxes stacked in the guest wing hallway when I came home from work each evening. They were labeled in Colleen's handwriting. Neat, precise. The penmanship of a woman who had spent her career writing place cards for other people's tables. She took the things I expected, her clothes, her jewelry, the books she kept on the nightstand. She took things I did not expect. She took the champagne glasses from the yacht, the olive jar from the cooler, the guest towel she had monogrammed with a W when she first moved in. She was taking the symbols of a life she had curated piece by piece, the way a stage set is dismantled after the show closes. On day 12, Jana came to find me. I was in my father's study, reviewing trust documents with Howard over the phone. Jana knocked. She waited until I waved her in. "I am moving out," she said. "I found a studio apartment in the city." I set the phone down. "Your mother's apartment?" "No, my own. I found it on Monday." That was significant. In 34 years, Jana had never lived anywhere Colleen had not chosen for her. "I am going to get a job," she said. "A real one." She held out her phone. On the screen was a portfolio, graphic design work, logos, brand identities, packaging layouts. The work was clean and confident in a way Jana herself had never been allowed to be. "My mother never let me show this to anyone," she said. "She said Whitmore women did not need to work." I looked at the portfolio. It was good. Not acceptable, not promising. Good. The branding pieces in particular had a clarity that reminded me of my father's navigation charts. Everything in its place, every line intentional. "This portfolio is strong," I said. "Lead with the branding pieces." She looked at me. She was waiting for something more. Forgiveness, maybe, or at least warmth. I did not have either to give. Not yet. But I had given her the only thing I was certain about, an honest professional assessment. That was the bridge I could build. She would have to decide whether to cross it. On day 28, Colleen's last boxes were stacked in the hallway. She walked through the empty guest suite one final time. I was not in the house when she left. I was at the office, reviewing the quarterly numbers Decker had delivered exactly on time. Some goodbyes are better left unheld. Howard called on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk, which is where I receive most news, good or bad, because that is where I spend most of my time. "The district attorney has reviewed the evidence," he said. "Charges are being filed. 3 counts related to the insurance claims, 1 count related to the forged testamentary document, 1 count related to the incident at sea. The more serious charge, Howard explained, was harder to prove. The physical evidence involving the railing was circumstantial. The bolts had been removed and reattached with weaker hardware, but it was difficult to prove who had done the work. The 2 crew members still had not been located for questioning. "But the reckless endangerment charge carries weight," Howard said. "Combined with the insurance pattern and the forged codicil, the picture is clear enough." Captain Dale Buchanan provided a written statement to the district attorney. His account of finding me in open water, my physical condition, the timeline, and the absence of any distress call from the yacht all supported my version of events. The arraignment was held on a Thursday. Colleen pleaded not guilty. I did not attend. I read about it in the local paper the following morning at my kitchen table, over a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The article was 4 paragraphs. It mentioned the yacht, the insurance policies, the forged codicil. It did not mention the sharks. Colleen's world had collapsed in concentric circles. Her attorney had withdrawn. Her family was divided. Her brother was still defending her. Her sister in Pennsylvania had stopped returning calls. She was living in a rental apartment on the other side of town, paying rent with savings that would not last long without the stipend. Howard and I spoke once more that week. He said something my father might have said. "We have charted the course. Now we let the current do the rest." "My father never trusted the current," I said. "He always kept his hand on the wheel." Howard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your father was a careful man, but he also knew when to stop steering and let the vessel settle." Another pause. "You have done the hard part, Mila. Let the law do its work now." I put the phone down. Then I looked at the compass on my desk. The needle pointed north the way it always did. I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and went back to work. The last piece fell into place 3 weeks before the trial date. Howard's investigator located the notary who had certified the forged codicil. She was 26 years old, lived in a town 40 minutes inland, and had been paid $2,000 in cash by Colleen to notarize a document she knew had not been signed by the person whose name appeared on it. The notary cooperated with the district attorney in exchange for reduced charges related to her own involvement. She provided text messages from Colleen arranging the meeting, photographs of the cash payment counted out on the notary's kitchen table, and a phone recording she had made during the transaction. She said she recorded it just in case. Howard told me about it over the phone. She was 26 and scared, he said. Colleen told her it was just a formality, that the family had all agreed, that no one would ever look at it twice. And she believed that? Howard paused. She believed the $2,000. People usually do. The evidence from the notary was devastating for Colleen's defense. The forged codicil had been created 6 months before the yacht trip, which meant Colleen had been planning the sequence for at least half a year. The warmth, the coffee, the spa weekend, the suggestion of the yacht trip. All of it had been scaffolding around an event she had been building since before the leaves changed. 6 months. She had been moving toward the moment she whispered in my ear while bringing me coffee, calling me sweetheart, and raising a glass to family. Howard called again the following week. "There is a plea negotiation happening," he said. "Her public defender recommended she take it." I looked at the compass on my desk. "What are they offering?" 5 to 8 years for the fraud charges. The reckless endangerment charge would run concurrently. She would likely serve 4 with good behavior. "Is that fair?" Howard was quiet for a long time. Fair would be her understanding that she endangered someone's life for something she was never going to inherit, he said. "I do not think any sentence teaches that." Colleen took the plea deal on a Wednesday morning. I found out at lunch. I finished my sandwich. Then I called Howard and thanked him. Then I went back to work. Some things do not require a ceremony. They only require an ending. The sentencing was brief, 5 years, eligible for parole after 3, insurance fraud, forgery of a testamentary document, reckless endangerment, concurrent sentences. I did not attend. Martin did. He called me afterward from the courthouse parking lot. His voice was tired. "She looked small," he said. I did not ask him to elaborate. I knew what he meant. Colleen had always filled a room. She was the kind of woman who walked in and rearranged the air around her. But in a courtroom, without the house, the name, the champagne, and the role she had built for herself, she was just a 58-year-old woman who had made a choice she could not take back. "Thank you for going," I said. "Someone from the family should have been there," Martin said, "even for this." I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief, exactly. I felt the specific kind of emptiness that comes when something you have been carrying for a long time is suddenly gone and you have not yet figured out what to do with the space it leaves behind. I worked until 7 that evening. The office was empty by 6. The cleaning crew came through and I could hear the vacuum in the hallway. I finished the report I was working on, turned off my desk lamp, and drove home. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for weeks. No Colleen in the kitchen, no Jana on the staircase, no coffee waiting on the counter in the morning, just rooms, furniture, and the cedar smell of my father's closet. I sat on the porch in my mother's rocking chair. The harbor was dark except for the lights. I counted them. 9, 10, all accounted for. The same number as every night. My phone rang. "Jana," I got the job, she said, at a design studio in Portland. I start Monday. Congratulations, I said. They told me I should lead with the branding pieces. I told you the same thing. She was quiet for a beat. I know you do not owe me anything, Mila. I know. Another pause. Good luck in Portland, I said. And I meant it. Not warmly, not coldly, just factually, the way my father would have said it. Some bridges are not built with warmth. They are built with the honest assessment that the person on the other side has the capacity to cross. I hung up. The rocking chair creaked against the porch boards. Salt air moved in from the harbor. Stars began to show. 6 months later, I activated the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation. It was not required. The Trust's successor beneficiary clause had designated the foundation as the recipient if I was ever gone. But I was alive, and the Trust remained in my name. I activated it because my father had built it into the structure of his estate for a reason, and because I finally understood what that reason was. The foundation funded maritime safety training for commercial fishing crews along the coast, training in emergency protocols, equipment maintenance, weather navigation, open water survival, the kind of training where the difference between knowing and not knowing could mean the difference between someone's father coming home or not. The first scholarship was named after Captain Dale Buchanan. Dale attended the announcement ceremony. It was held outdoors near the docks, with maritime blue and white bunting moving in the wind. He wore his only suit, navy, slightly too large in the shoulders. He shook my hand with the same grip that had pulled me out of the water. "Your father and I never met," he said, "but I think we would have gotten along." "He would have asked you about your boat," I said. "He always asked about the boat first." Dale smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile. Howard was there, too. He stood near the back, leaning against a piling, looking like a man who had finished a very long job and was finally allowing himself to be tired. He was retiring the following year. 40 years of trust law, estate litigation, and Whitmore family business. After the ceremony, he came over to me. "Your father's last instruction to me was simple," Howard said. "Make sure she does not need me." "And you?" He looked out at the harbor. "I think I am getting there." Later that week, I drove to the cemetery. Garrett Whitmore. Beloved father, husband, captain. The headstone was plain granite, just the way he wanted it. No flourishes, no nautical motifs. Just his name, his dates, and a single line he had chosen himself. "Leave the dock clean." I placed the compass on the headstone. The brass caught the afternoon sun. The needle swung once, then settled. Then I picked it back up. I was not done with it yet. I drove home. On the way, I passed the marina where the yacht was still docked. I had not sold it. I had not used it. I slowed down and looked at it through the driver's side window. White hull, dark trim, stern rail replaced. Someday I would take it out, when the water felt like my father's water again. Not yet. That evening, I sat on the porch in the rocking chair. The harbor spread out below the house, the way it always had. The way it had when my mother watched it. The way it had when my father counted the lights, and the way it would after I was gone, when someone else sat in this chair and looked at the same water. I took out the compass and opened it. The needle swung once, then again. A small hesitation, the way a compass needle moves when it is finding itself after being carried too far. Then it settled north. My father once said a compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you which way you are already facing. I had carried that sentence in my head for years before I truly understood it. He had not been talking about navigation. He had been talking about knowing who you are before someone else tries to tell you. I closed the compass and put it back in my pocket. The yacht was visible from the porch, a white shape at the marina, lit from below by the dock lights. The stern rail had been replaced with marine-grade hardware, bolted, welded, inspected twice. Howard had arranged it. Someday I would take it out again. I would pack the old red cooler myself. No champagne. Just sandwiches and root beer, the way my father used to. Someday, when the water felt like mine again. The harbor lights came on one at a time, the way they did every evening at this latitude, this time of year. I counted them the way my father counted them. 7, 8, 9, 10, all on. None missing. The rocking chair creaked against the porch boards. The boards creaked against the joists my father had nailed himself. Salt air moved through the porch screens. The stars were beginning to show. Not all of them. Just the first ones. The ones bright enough to shine through the harbor light. 10 lights. The same number as every night. I kept the compass in my pocket and listened to the boards beneath the chair and the water moving softly against the docks. And I did not count anything else, because there was nothing left to count. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If Mila's journey reminded you that preparation can be the quietest form of protection, or made you think about the people who stand behind you when it matters most, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you have not already, take a moment to subscribe. There are more stories waiting for you in the description below. Every single one is about someone who refused to disappear. I will see you in the next one.